The story begins on an autumn evening. Away from the hustle and bustle of New York, in the corner of a peaceful neighborhood, stands a classic American-style restaurant, the Copper Elm. Its exterior is reminiscent of the past. Brick walls and wooden shutters radiate a nostalgic warmth. Inside, dim golden lights cast a cozy glow. Laughter and the clinking of silverware echo between the wooden tables. Everyone is lost in their own stories. Some are enjoying a family dinner, others are savoring a quiet evening alone. The door swings open, and a man steps inside. He wears a simple yet elegant trench coat. Removing his hat, he runs a hand through his hair. His eyes scan the room. His entrance is quiet, unremarkable. But within that silence is a storm waiting to be unleashed. Donald J. Trump. Tonight there is no official business, no entourage of bodyguards, no flashing cameras. Perhaps for the first time in a long while, he has come somewhere alone. To an outsider, he is just a man here for a meal. Yet the moment he walks in, the atmosphere subtly shifts. In the corner, a few tables fall silent. Some recognize him immediately, others just sense familiarity. One of the waitresses, a young girl, likely a college student, pauses for a brief second. Whispered murmurs begin. But Trump remains unfazed, his posture unwavering. Trump chooses a table by the window. It's a familiar spot, one he has visited many times before, where old conversations and friendships once unfolded. He takes his seat, drapes his coat over the chair. The menu arrives. The young waitress, slightly nervous but maintaining professionalism, takes his order. Classic American burger and black coffee. Trump nods slightly. He is serious yet polite. He sits back, gazing out the window. Rain has begun to fall. The glow of the streetlights reflects off the glass, shimmering in the night. Inside, a nostalgic Frank Sinatra tune plays softly in the background. In that moment, time seems to slow. Traces of the past. Trump's mind drifts to the past. This restaurant is not just any place. In his younger years, he spent many evenings here. Before politics, before the global spotlight, this was one of the places where he took a breath amid his rise in the business world. He remembers sitting here with his father, discussing plans, making decisions. There are still marks on the table, faint but real. This table holds memories, whispers and stares. But outside, the world that once revolved around him has changed. As he sits there, the glances around him grow more noticeable. At a nearby table, a couple seems to recognize him. The woman leans toward her partner. "Isn't that Trump?" "No way, he's alone. It can't be him." But one of the waiters discreetly pulls out his phone, typing a quick message. Within moments, the message reaches the back of the restaurant. Greg Dawson, the restaurant's manager, a man in his 50s known for his strict demeanor and strong political views, leans out from the kitchen doorway, narrowing his eyes. He scans the room until his gaze locks onto Trump's table. His brows furrow. The silent note. As the meal is prepared, the young waitress approaches Greg, holding a small folded note. Greg lowers his voice. "Slip this onto the table. Make it look like a receipt. Don't say a word." The girl hesitates, reluctant, but she takes the note. Her steps slow as she approaches the table, her heart pounding. Trump meets her eyes briefly, sensing her discomfort. She forces a polite smile and sets the note down as if it were just the check. Trump thanks her, his gaze lingering for a moment before she quickly walks away. He picks up the note and unfolds it. The message is brief, just a few words. "This restaurant isn't for you. You're not welcome here." A deep silence. Trump lifts his eyes from the note. The sounds of the restaurant continue, but for him, the world has momentarily gone silent. His expression doesn't change. No anger, no disappointment, just thought, deep thought. A man sitting at the bar notices the exchange. He nudges the person next to him. What did the waitress just give him? But no one dares to ask Trump directly, because even in silence his presence is commanding, powerful, unshaken. An inner monologue. His mind turns inward. Childhood memories, family lessons, decades of struggle flash before him. And then he remembers something his father once told him. Sometimes the strongest answer is given without a single word. Trump folds the note, tucks it into the pocket of his coat, and simply looks back out the window. No one understands exactly what he is thinking, but the atmosphere in the restaurant has changed. A silent storm has settled over the room, and this is only the beginning. Trump placed the note into the inner pocket of his jacket. His expression remained calm, but deep inside, emotions swirled like a storm. Those few words on the piece of paper had suddenly opened the doors to the past. To most, it was just a simple message, but to him it was an echo of history, a reflection of experiences, and a summary of human nature. In the silence of that moment, Trump's mind was racing. People had always judged him by his appearance, his words, his actions. But he was a man who knew that nothing in life came easy. Born into wealth, yet targeted at every step, criticized as much as he was admired. And now this note, perhaps the simplest yet sharpest message he had ever received. Tension in the kitchen. As the silence lingered at the table, one of the waiters in the kitchen started whispering about what had happened. Greg made that decision on his own, he muttered to the other employees. But things like this always backfire. In the back of the restaurant, tension filled the air. The head chef turned to the waitress and asked, "Was the note really that bad?" She nodded. Just a few words, but the meaning was harsh. It wasn't necessary. Greg, the restaurant manager, stormed in, his voice firm and arrogant. "This is my place. I have the right to decide who I want here." But his words were met with uneasy glances among the staff. They weren't comfortable with his attitude. Justice wasn't just about politics. It revealed itself in the smallest moments of humanity. The silent response of the customers. Meanwhile, some customers in the restaurant had taken notice. An elderly couple at a table in the back exchanged looks. The woman placed her hand on her husband's arm. "No matter what you think of him, this isn't right," her husband nodded. "I've been coming here for years, but tonight, for the first time, I'm embarrassed to be sitting here." Slowly, the mood in the restaurant shifted. Some customers couldn't take their eyes off Trump, while others looked away in shame. Trump's internal monologue memories flooded Trump's mind. The times he had been underestimated in his youth, the moments when the media tore him apart. But the emotions stirring within him weren't anger. No, he had learned to see every experience as a lesson. A man must learn to wash away the hatred directed at him with his own inner strength, he thought to himself. At that moment, his eyes met those of a young boy sitting by the window. The child, no more than 8 or 9 years old, was watching him intently, observing his reaction. And in that instant, Trump realized something. This moment wasn't just about him. Everyone in the room was part of this story. Every glance, every whisper, every silence was a reflection of society itself. The true power of the note. The note wasn't just words on paper. That small slip represented the biases of society, the divisions, the judgments placed on people based on identity rather than character. To Trump, it was more than just a message, it was a symbol, but he decided to respond to that symbol not with anger, but with grace. And this was the turning point of the story, because most people expected him to stand up, to argue, to storm out of the restaurant. But Trump did none of those things. He simply remained in his seat. The waitress's tears back in the kitchen, the young waitress couldn't hold back her tears. Deep down, she knew what she had done was wrong. Greg had pressured her into delivering that note, but now she felt like she was part of something shameful. The head chef placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You didn't do the right thing," he said gently, "but sometimes humanity begins with regret." At that moment, the back door opened, and an elderly woman, one of the restaurant's longtime regulars, walked in. She had witnessed everything and understood what had happened. Quietly, she made her way to Trump's table, the first silent stand. She leaned slightly forward and spoke softly. "I know who you are, Mr. Trump. We may not agree with you, but you didn't deserve that." Trump smiled faintly, nodding in acknowledgement. The woman returned to her seat. That small gesture was enough to shift the energy in the restaurant. People were beginning to see that this was no longer about politics. It was about something deeper, something human. And the ripple effect begins. This small moment wouldn't stay confined within the walls of the restaurant. A customer who had noticed everything pulled out their phone and shared the story online. And just like that, the impact began to spread, growing larger with every passing second. That night, only a few people inside the restaurant knew the contents of the note. However, the silence in the atmosphere, the exchanged glances at the tables, and Trump's unwavering demeanor made it clear that this was no ordinary event. And one customer had secretly recorded the moment on their phone. The camera captured only a quiet man reading a note, then shifting his gaze outside, followed by a woman silently showing him support. But this very moment would be the spark that ignited a chain reaction of social impact. The video was uploaded to social media the next morning. Its title was brief but powerful. "They kicked him out, but he never shouted. He answered with silence." In the first few hours, it garnered only a few hundred views. However, the comments started to gain attention. People were discussing Trump's reaction, finding his silence unexpectedly mature and deeply human. Then the video exploded. A journalist on Twitter quoted the video and wrote, "This isn't a political story. This is a story about humanity." And with that sentence, the event took on a whole new dimension. It was no longer just about a note or a restaurant manager's actions. People started to see the deeper meaning behind it. The ripple effect, edited versions of the video began circulating on TikTok. Music was added, dramatic transitions enhanced the storytelling. Slow-motion clips of Trump lifting his eyes from the note and the woman approaching him were framed with emotional intensity. The comment sections flooded. Sometimes the strongest response is silence. "I don't want to yell anymore. This man's reaction inspired me. This story made me think. How many people have I judged just by their appearance?" A hashtag was born. Number sign, silent response. Then another. Number sign, grace not noise. And finally a movement. The revolution of silence, celebrities take notice. Well-known figures started weighing in. A talk show host brought up the event on air. "No matter what you think of Trump, there's a lesson in humanity here, and we can't ignore it." A musician shared a poem inspired by the moment. A writer published a short blog post titled, "The Grace Lost in the Noise." The restaurant becomes a protest site. Within a week, people began leaving flowers in front of the Copper Elm restaurant. Some sat in silence, while others left small notes. This table is the table of silence. Greg Dawson's decision was no longer just a business move. It had become a symbol of society's conscience. Brands couldn't stay silent. A few major brands released indirect messages. Grace doesn't always make noise, but it leaves a mark. These campaigns amplified the social awareness surrounding the event. Still, Trump hadn't said a word. With the story reaching massive proportions, everyone expected a statement, but Trump remained silent. No tweet, no press release. Then one day his official social media account posted just one image, a photo of the table where he had sat that night. Below it, a single line. Some answers aren't given in words. Hundreds of thousands of shares, millions of likes, and again silence. But a silence that echoed powerfully. A societal shift begins. Teachers began using the story as an example in classrooms. Psychologists discussed the power of quiet but dignified responses in social change. Newspapers published op-eds. Trump's silence held up a mirror to all of us. And one writer ended their piece with these words: "Perhaps revolutions don't start with slogans, but at silent tables." The stories behind what we see are always deeper. After the incident went viral on social media, the focus shifted not just to Trump, but also to the establishment where it all took place, the Copper Elm restaurant. As people dug into the background of the restaurant's manager, Greg Dawson, it became clear that this wasn't just an isolated event, but part of a much larger societal structure. The restaurant staff found themselves divided after the incident. Some began questioning Greg's decision, while others remained silent out of fear. However, as the situation escalated, the pressure on the employees grew. In particular, a young waitress named Emma could no longer suppress the guilt she had been carrying. Emma's confession. One evening, after her shift, Emma quietly approached a journalist. Her eyes were teary and her voice trembled. "I was the one who handed him the note. But not by choice. Our manager forced me to. I still don't feel right about it." The journalist's eyes widened. For the first time, the truth behind the scenes was coming to light. Emma's confession proved that this wasn't just about a customer being mistreated. It was also a story of coercion and pressure. Emma's courageous revelation quickly gained traction on social media. Videos titled "A Young Waitress's Moral Confession" went viral. People flooded the comments with support. True courage is admitting your mistakes and speaking up. Everyone makes mistakes, but what matters is how we face them. Greg Dawson breaks his silence. As public pressure mounted, Greg finally had to respond. In an interview with a local news station, he stated, "My job is to protect my business. What I did that night may have been misunderstood, but my intentions were not bad." However, this explanation didn't satisfy anyone. People weren't just looking for an apology, they wanted real change. The Copper Elm started seeing mass reservation cancellations. Soon, some of its food suppliers even suspended their partnerships. Employees take a stand. After Emma's confession, other employees slowly began speaking out. Waiter Jack, head chef Emily, janitor Carla. They all described Greg's authoritarian and oppressive management style, which had persisted for years. This was no longer just about a note. It had evolved into a larger discussion about workers' rights and toxic workplace culture. We were just doing our jobs, but sometimes staying silent makes you complicit. A silent revolution. Inside the restaurant, a quiet revolution was taking place within the Copper Elm. Employees came together to propose a new management model for the restaurant. Greg initially laughed off the idea, but public pressure continued to mount. People took to social media with a clear message. If the owner doesn't change, we will. We'll eat somewhere else. A new hope emerges. While Trump remained silent after the incident, his quiet response had amplified the voices of others. Emma's courage, the employees' testimonies, and society's moral reckoning initiated the Copper Elm's transformation. The restaurant's new vision became clear. No one should ever feel unwelcome. The impact of that night's events had spread beyond social media, resonating through different layers of society. Many saw what had happened not just as a political moment, but as a reflection of human dignity, grace, and the power of silence to drive social change. The Copper Elm was no longer just a restaurant. It had become a symbol, and at the heart of it all stood a man who spoke not with words, but with his presence, Donald Trump. A new leadership takes over. The pressure on Greg Dawson had become unsustainable. Sponsors had pulled out, employees had gone on strike, and customers had called for boycotts. In the end, Greg made the decision to step down. In a brief statement to the press, he said only this: "Everyone makes mistakes, but some mistakes grow when you stay silent." The restaurant was restructured under the collective management of its employees. The menu was revamped, and a new slogan was placed on the walls: "Grace begins in silence." Emma was now the restaurant's public relations manager. Other employees worked under a fair system, and each night at a corner table, a small plaque reminded everyone of the change that silence had set in motion. This is the table where silence spoke the loudest. An unexpected visit from Trump. Months later, when the restaurant reopened with its new identity, a familiar figure walked through the door. It was Trump, alone, as before. He sat at the same table. This time, Emma approached. They exchanged a brief but meaningful glance. Emma smiled softly. "We changed the menu, but at this table, nothing has changed." Trump nodded. "Some things should stay the same." That night, Trump ordered just one thing: a black coffee. He sat at the table, pulled out a notepad, and quietly wrote a few lines. No one ever learned what was written, but then he tore out a page and handed it to Emma. "You can be at peace." The final word. Silence became a movement. Throughout the entire ordeal, Trump had never raised his voice, never made a statement, but his silence became an echo. It reminded people of the power of grace, patience, and dignified composure. The Copper Elm was no longer just a restaurant, it was a vessel for a social message. People came not just for a meal, but to remember a moment in history, and Trump's silence left them with one lingering question: what would you have done? Perhaps the story had ended, but the impact it left would last far longer.